Good afternoon, Moadim Lesimcha. It's Tuesday, April 7th. I'm Laura Cornfield, and this is IBA News, broadcasting from Jerusalem. Israel's demand that Iran recognize the Jewish state in a comprehensive agreement over its nuclear program is misguided policy. That's the view of U.S. President Barack Obama, who told NPR radio that he rejects Prime Minister Netanyahu's linkage of the issue to the nuclear framework agreement. The U.S. President also insists that the world and Israel are better off with the deal.
We're now in a position where Iran has agreed to unprecedented inspections and verifications of its program, providing assurances that it is peaceful in nature. You have them rolling back a number of pathways that they currently have available to break out and get a nuclear weapon. You have assurances that their stockpile of highly enriched uranium remains in a place where they cannot create a nuclear weapon. And that lasts not only for the first 10 years, but the inspections and verifications that are unprecedented go for another decade after that. Now, ideally, we would see a situation in which Iran, seeing sanctions reduced, would start focusing on its economy, on training its people, on re-entering the world community, to lessening its provocative activities in the region. But if it doesn't change, we are so much better if we have this deal in place than if we don't. And so I'm not trying to avoid your question. I think that there are different trends inside of Iran. I think there are hardliners inside of Iran that think it is the right thing to do to oppose us, to seek to destroy Israel, to cause havoc in places like Syria or Yemen or Lebanon. And then I think there are others inside of Iran who think that this is counterproductive. And it is possible that if we sign this nuclear deal, we strengthen the hand of those more moderate forces inside of Iran. But the key point I want to make is the deal is not dependent on anticipating those changes. If they don't change at all, we're still better off having the deal.
A leading U.S. political pundit disagreed with Obama's assessment.
Obama is pretending that the issue is recognition of Israel. A lot of states don't recognize Israel, but Iran is the only state that says that its ambition is to annihilate Israel and is attempting to acquire the weapons which would do exactly that. And for Obama to say, who cares about that, it's a non-starter, is a way to say that Israel concerns mean nothing to him. And that's why people are upset about his policy on Israel. I'm sorry that he's hurt by it, but I think there are larger issues at stake.
U.S. Ambassador to Israel Dan Shapiro says that the Iran nuclear framework agreement is not perfect, nor is it complete. That's the response to outspoken Israeli criticism of the deal. In an exclusive interview, Shapiro also told Israel Television's Yaakov Elon that President Obama and Prime Minister Netanyahu will meet after a new government is formed in Israel.
Ambassador Shapiro, thank you very much for coming over.
Glad to be with you, Jacob.
Let me start by quoting Prime Minister Netanyahu. Not a single centrifuge is destroyed, not a single nuclear facility is shut down, including the underground facilities that they built illicitly. Thousands of centrifuges will keep spinning, enriching uranium. True or false?
What we have in this framework that was announced in Lausanne on Friday is an outline of an agreement, and we still don't have an agreement. There are still some tough negotiations ahead between now and June 30th that would, for the longest period of time and in the most verifiable way, ensure that Iran does not acquire a nuclear weapon.
So when Prime Minister Netanyahu says all of this, is he wrong to say this?
Look, while the agreement does not have everything everybody would want in it, and of course we would agree that we would, in a perfect world, want to see Iran have absolutely none of these capabilities, the important thing is to ensure that the capabilities that they retain, significantly reduced and carefully monitored, do not permit it to have a breakout to a nuclear weapon in anything less than a year. That will give us the ability to ensure that Iran does not achieve a nuclear weapon and to respond if they try to achieve it. That is, in our judgment, the best opportunity to improve our security, to improve the security of our allies in the region who could otherwise be threatened by an Iranian nuclear weapon in what is now a 2 to 3 month breakout time.
The Iranians say, among other things, that military facilities will not be inspected. They say that sanctions will be lifted immediately, not, as the U.S. Said, gradually. So who should we believe?
Well, it's understandable that in the wake of the announcement of a framework, which is not finalized, with a number of very tough issues still to be negotiated, the Iranians will try to present this in the best possible light to their population. By the way, I've heard some criticisms from hardline elements in Iran as well, just as we will point out the facts of the agreement. And the facts are that sanctions relief, broad sanctions relief, is absolutely tied to Iran verifiably meeting its commitments under this agreement. And the inspections regime would prevent Iran from pursuing any of the available paths to a nuclear weapon, either through the uranium enrichment facilities or through a plutonium plant or through a covert means.
This whole thing, Mr. Ambassador, looks a little bit half-baked. What was the rush?
Well, indeed, it's not complete. What was announced in Lausanne was not an agreement. It was a framework for an agreement. But as indicated even during the announcement, there are still a number of issues that have to be negotiated. There's no question that what was important was to demonstrate that these negotiations had an opportunity to achieve an agreement, because at some point it's very difficult to sustain these negotiations. It's very difficult, frankly, to sustain the international sanctions regime that we have, the United States has led and put in place and enforced against Iran, if there is not some evidence that these negotiations can succeed.
Finally, Mr. Ambassador, these two leaders, Obama and Netanyahu, will they, if ever, sit together and iron out their differences and start working together?
They have met many, many times in the course of their 2 terms in office. They are partners, as Israeli prime ministers and American presidents are always partners. We, of course, are awaiting the formation of the new Israeli government following the recent election. But we absolutely intend to deepen our coordination and our consultations with Israel, our partner, our security ally. And I believe
when this government is finalized and formed, will Prime Minister Netanyahu be invited to the White House?
I have no doubt that Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Obama will meet. There's many other levels and much other work that can be done to achieve the consultations and the security coordination that we will need. Frankly, it will be building on a dramatic security cooperation and military and intelligence coordination that has already been achieved under Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Obama's joint leadership. I believe that's going to continue and deepen, and I believe it's going to give Israelis confidence, and as will our other allies in the region, that the United States has its back and will prevent these threats that it understandably fears from materializing.
We got the back thing. Thank you very much, Ambassador Shapiro.
Thank you, Jacob.
Iranian President Hassan Rouhani greeted Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who arrived in Tehran today for a series of high-level meetings. Accompanied by a delegation of Turkish lawmakers, the Turkish president's one-day visit to the Islamic Republic comes despite his recent comments criticizing Iran for backing the Shiite Houthi rebels fighting in Yemen and voicing his support for the Saudi-led military operations against them. While diplomatic ties between the two countries have suffered in recent years, particularly over disagreements concerning the Syrian civil war, they maintain strong economic ties, with Iran being the second largest gas supplier to Turkey. The anti-Israel group called Anonymous, which specializes in cyber terrorism, threatened a cyber holocaust against Israel starting today. While attempting to sabotage key Israeli websites, no major government sites were affected. IBA's Ariel Sullivan brings us more in this report.
In previous years, they were able to hack government sites, but this year, the anti-Israel hacking collective known as Anonymous has run up against a robust cybersecurity wall and failed in their threat to cause an electronic holocaust as promised.
We'll take down your servers, government websites, Israeli military websites, banks, and public institutions. We'll erase you from cyberspace as we have every year, the 7th of April 2015. will be an electronic Holocaust. Our message to the foolish Benjamin Netanyahu and all leaders in the Zionist entities, as promised in previous attacks, we will continue to electronically attack until the people of Palestine are free.
Big talk, but their effect was marginal. Government ministries were attacked, but their cyber wall protected them.
So far, we've seen a few hundreds of different accounts that have been hacked. Most of them are because of used default usernames and passwords for administrative interfaces. We haven't seen major sites that have been hacked so far.
So the major government sites, which are their main target, they haven't been affected, have they?
They haven't been affected, but they have been attacked. At the moment, it looks like they're just blocking any IP addresses coming from abroad.
Do you think this is frustrating the Anonymous?
I think it's all about propaganda. So Anonymous is publishing in their forms that they actually succeeded in hacking and making distributed denial of service to governmental sites in Israel, even though it's not true. From where they're trying to reach it, it looks like they succeeded, but they're just being blocked, and it looks like either they're not aware or just using it as part of their propaganda.
A few dozen websites belonging to musicians like Shlomo Hanoch and non-profit organizations have been hacked, and their homepages were replaced with a photo of a Muslim militant holding the Islamic State flag and a message signed by Anu Ghost. Nevertheless, the public is cautioned against opening email from unknown sources and urged to change their passwords.
What I would suggest to the people in Israel is to change all default passwords to their own complex enough passwords. We've seen a list of 6,000 modems that have been hacked only because they have default passwords. We haven't seen something which is majorly dangerous. It's people from home and so on, but still using the default password makes it easy for the anonymous and other hackers.
Ari O'Sullivan for IBA News.
Danny Dankner, former chairman of Bank Hapoalim, was released this morning from Hermon prison after serving less than 6 months in jail. The parole board shortened his term by a third due to good behavior. Dankner was convicted in December 2013 by the Tel Aviv District Court on charges of breach of public trust, fraud, and misrepresentation of the bank. He was fined 1 million shekels and sentenced to a year in jail, a term which was later shortened to 8 months in an appeal to the High Court. The fierce fighting between Islamic State terrorists and Palestinian gunmen in the Yarmouk refugee camp outside of Damascus continues, and thousands of Palestinian refugees await evacuation and an escape from the horrific violence. IBA's Margot Didkevich brings us this report.
The United Nations Security Council is demanding an immediate end to hostilities and access for humanitarian aid to reach thousands of Palestinian refugees trapped inside the Yarmouk camp on the outskirts of Damascus. An estimated 18,000 Palestinians have been caught up in violent fighting between Islamic State terrorists who seized control of the camp and Palestinian forces loyal to Hamas. The London-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said Islamic State gunmen have seized control of more than 90% of the camp and joined forces with its arch-rival Jabhat al-Nusra to fight the Palestinian groups. Syrian regime forces who have laid siege on the Yarmouk camp for more than 2 years continue daily shelling and bombing sites inside the camp. Since entering the camp on Friday, Islamic State gunmen have reportedly beheaded some 21 people. For some years now, camp residents have reportedly been on the verge of starvation, with basic food and vital medical care unavailable, as well as a lack of basic services. After holding a closed-door session at the UN Security Council yesterday to discuss the plight of the Palestinian refugees, a demand was made to allow safe passage for agency personnel to enter the camp and treat the camp's inhabitants.
The members condemned in the strongest terms the grave crimes committed by Daesh and Jabhat al-Nusra against 18,000 civilians in the camp and emphasized the need that such crimes do not go unpunished. The members called for the protection of civilians in the camp, for ensuring humanitarian access to the area, including by providing life-saving assistance, and ensure safe passage and evacuation of the civilians.
Pierre Krachenbuhl, Commissioner General of the UN Relief and Works Agency in charge of the Palestinian refugees, warned the violence has escalated out of control, saying it is time for political leaders to intervene.
Currently, it is simply too dangerous to access Yarmouk and even the distribution points that we had previously, and therefore this explains why we have, on the one hand, a call on parties to cease hostilities that put civilians in danger, but of course that would also mean that would enable humanitarian assistance to start again, and we are, as I said, prepared to do that.
We hope that the Security Council will adopt a position to secure a safety passage through UN agencies, particularly UNRWA, to save and protect the 18,000, maybe 16,000 now in the refugee camp.
The violence in the Yarmouk camp has also spilled into the Gaza Strip, where an explosion in the Sheikh Radwan neighborhood was reportedly linked to the arrest of an ISIS operative by Hamas. With the situation becoming more desperate in the Yarmouk camp by the hour, the coming days will tell whether the UN call for assistance will be acted on, or whether they will fail as previous international efforts to end the Syrian civil war did. Margot Dudkevich, IBA News.
Shiite Sunni Muslim violence has spilled over from Yemen into Saudi Arabia itself. A Saudi policeman was killed and 3 others wounded during raids in the eastern Shiite town of Qatif. The fatalities occurred as the police and reported terrorist elements engaged in a fierce gun battle during a raid on the gunmen's hideout. The police reportedly retrieved automatic weapons, pistols, and communication equipment as 4 men were arrested after the firefight ended. Heavy clashes were reported during a number of police raids in the town. Tensions have been growing in the country's oil-rich eastern province, spurred on by violent sectarian conflict in neighboring Yemen, Iraq, and Syria. The Kenyan Air Force struck back at bases of Islamic terrorists who massacred 148 mostly Christian university students last week. But as the families of the victims mourn their losses, they're also asking their leaders why security had not been beefed up ahead of the attack. IBA's Alexander Jen reports.
6 days after the al-Shabaab attack at Garissa University, family members are still seeking closure for the massacre that took the lives of 148 Kenyans, 142 of them just young students. Relatives are still waiting at the mortuary to identify their loved ones. The 15 hours of carnage began when the masked Somali militants stormed the university campus in the early hours of the morning. With grenades and guns in their hands, the al-Qaeda-linked militants opened fire on the mainly Christian students, leaving over 80 students wounded in recovery. As family members wait to identify the victims of the siege, the Kenyan Air Force took the first major military action since the incident. The Air Force has reportedly carried out successful airstrikes, destroying 2 of the al-Shabaab camps in the Gedo region of Somalia. However, it's still unclear whether the airstrikes were in retaliation for the bloodshed at the university or a part of a series of military actions to keep dangerous militants from crossing the Somali border. The first raids on the Somali Islamist militants date back to 2011. Still, the most serious of questions raised since the killing spree surrounds security. Why did it take so long for Kenyan forces to respond? If intelligence did know about the likelihood of an attack beforehand, why wasn't there increased security? A local resident weighs in, saying, in terms of security here, the population is also to blame, as they are not saying where the enemies are. Though residents are lending a helping hand to the victims. There's been a shortage of blood for the over 80 students who are still being cared for.
Came to give blood, to support and sustain the lives of friends, colleagues, and young innocent Kenyan, and some of the experiences that we have seen from there are one very terrible.
Terrible and tragic. A scene we can only hope will be prevented in the future. As Kenya continues the healing process from the attack, many worry that it's only a matter of time before the next tragedy. Alexander Jen for IBA News.
Turning to arts and entertainment, the Israeli opera is celebrating the Passover holiday with a special production of the opera Nabucco, which debuts tonight at the Tel Aviv Performing Arts Center. Verdi's Jewish opera is about King Nabucco of Babylon and his daughter, who falls in love with a Jew, something unheard of for a princess. It tells the story of the king's destruction of the first temple and the attempts of the Israelites to prevent the tragedy. The production is conducted by Daniel Oren and directed by Stefano Mezzones di Prolefera. Nabucco runs for 14 performances through the 25th of April. Tickets are pricey, with the cheapest seats starting at 175 shekels. In local finance, the shekel was mixed in foreign currency trading, while shares were up in a shortened trading day on the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange. Here are the numbers. Turning to the weather forecast, and tomorrow a Sharav heat wave is predicted. Here are the highs and lows for the next 24 hours at home and abroad. Thanks for being with us this evening. Aaron Viner will be at this desk tomorrow to bring you the latest breaking news from Israel. Until then, I'm Laura Cornfield, wishing you Moadim L'Simcha and Shalom from Jerusalem.